something.
One of you say something again, see if my audio path is working.
I think, Robert, you asked if your audio was working, and the answer is yes. I just had my volume low, so it's better now.
Yeah.
And good evening, everyone.
And also, if Liz or I talk, we're going to be sharing a microphone.
Oh,
Thank goodness, I was about to open up Chrome because I figured there was a Firefox volume issue, but you saved me from having to do that.
Couldn't quite parse that.
Sorry, I was going to try another browser. You saved me from having to do that.
So compared to other people, your audio is really diminished, Rich.
and what I tend to do is to keep my mic open but locally muted. It's easier for me, Tico.
Yeah, for these small sessions in particular. I'd like to remind everyone to share a video. We want this to be a meeting around a table. Yep, started. So the join rate is starting to slow down. Give it just a moment more. So thanks everyone for taking the time to have this conversation. If you've not already, please skim through the notes, the agenda that we have for today. Let me know if there are any agenda bashes needed. Not hearing any. Let's jump in and talk about any hot points that we need to for preparation for IETF 114 that are not already later in the agenda. We'll be talking about Zulip a little bit later on. We'll be talking about the agenda pages and the data tracker a little bit later on. What else is pressing for 114 that we need to bring up during this call? If you remember anything as we're going through, make a note in the topic section and we will revisit it at the end to make sure that we're covering everything. Alice notes that we don't have any RFC production blocking issues. For turning down tools.ietf.org, the blocking point remains the bibxml service. In particular, there are two data sets that are being adjusted. You can see in the issue tracker for the bibxml project that there's a lot of activity around the DOI data set and around the IANA data sets. We are to the point where we really need to turn this down very soon anyhow. I was going to make the argument that we do that this week and take the pain of the things that might break, which, as best I can tell, would be XML to RSC v2 documents with DOI references. Kasara has pointed to a couple of things that suggest that we should wait and make the cutover after IETF 114.
But
I
on
welcome
the other hand, right,
opinions from anyone in the
we are
call.
currently into a silent phase regarding IDs. Nobody can submit it, so isn't it the right time to do it?
Well, we'll come out of that phase on Monday, and during the week, people would be quite irritated if they're not able to submit and have activity happen during that week.
Okay, fair enough.
The flip side is that there's a lot of other things that go away, not just the xml.rc.tools.ietf.org. It's just the IETF-TOOLS.ietf.org things will go down and be replaced with redirects to the things that we have in the tools migration plan. If we do this before a meeting, we're going to get a lot of feedback early about, what's not working and what's making people unhappy. We do it after the meeting. It's going to trickle in over a meeting cycle, and we'll get a measurable portion of it during IETF 115 the next time people wake up and bother to touch anything IETF. So, since Kasara is going to basically be in the hot seat on supporting the bibxml service, I'm sensitive to his instinct that we should wait until after. And unless somebody pushes us otherwise, that's what I will take to the board on Thursday and tell them that we're doing. We really do need to cut that tie immediately after the tools.ietf.org is getting exactly 0 support, and it is rotting. So it is time to let Henrik turn it off. Okay, moving forward, I guess one last thing I noted in the notes, I'll call it out here. We still haven't created a replacement for Daily Dose. I'm planning on letting that break when we make the transition and backfilling it later when we get the resources to actually build out a replacement for it. And we still only have a Band-Aid in place for the RPC to have an online copy of BAP. I think that the RPC discovered that they could use BAP locally as well. So I don't know how important the Band-Aid online service is. It is still on the development plan to integrate it into author tools, but it's still a ways away. Alice, do you have any input on that? Yeah, the mute's got you. So remember, there's a microphone in the upper left and a microphone in the lower right, and they both matter. I'll move forward and you can either send stuff into the chat or when you get the microphone working, just let me know. So I'll move on to the Nomcom eligibility calculations. Since the last meeting, we discovered that there is a significant number of people that registered and paid for online meetings like IETF 112 who did not attend any sessions according to Medico's gathering of who signed in to the sessions. So they don't appear in any blue sheets. And by significant, I mean 200, order 200 people at 112, at 111. At 113, we have the added complexity of people who attended in person but did not bother to sign in with the Medico local client, i.e. this would be the equivalent of in old sessions not signing the blue sheet at all. For Nomcom eligibility, this is going to be an interesting behavior to account for going forward. I think we're going to need to be able to very clearly have a picked up the badge flag out of the registration system that we can use for ensuring that, you know, for validating online participation, in-person participation. And we'll double check that Medico's interfaces to report blue sheets to us is working correctly. We're asking a few people who fell into the signed up and paid but didn't attend any sessions to verify that they didn't attend any sessions to make sure that we don't have a problem with what was happening at Medico. But so far we have no reason to believe that there was a problem there. Eric noted that we may want to at least measure what the impact of fee waivers are on participation, if not include those in the Nomcom eligibility calculations that the ISG is
it's
working
actually,
out.
the question was really whether there is an intersection of giving out fee waiver and people not attending, because we have a limited amount of fee waiver, right, for on-site. And if those people get the fee waiver but do not participate, it rings a bell, because we prevented possibly other people to get a fee waiver. Now, it's maybe just a nightmare in my mind, so let's ignore it, but I would love to get some data. If, 10% get a fee waiver in person, do not show up, I'm fine. If it's 90, I have a problem. Right, because there's a limited
We'll
amount
see
of
what
them.
we can back out, Ryan. I may be
Yeah.
poking you to see if you've got the data on who was fee waivered or not.
The data must be there, right? So
Yeah, we have that.
All right. I note in the notes we turned off, we configured Cloudflare to require TLS 1.2 or greater for all of the web properties that are going through Cloudflare on the 29th of June, and no issues have been reported since then. Medico has a fork of Zulip 5.3 that they've modified. Primarily, the modification allows direct messaging from inside the Medico client. So someone using the Medico client can direct message other participants. Base Zulip does not support that yet. the Zulip maintainers are reviewing the fork to see if they would be willing to pull that code in. The changes are small enough that they're still willing to provide us volunteer support while we're running on the fork. The test client is up and ready to go for tomorrow's chair testing. Greg, if you have any time this afternoon, it might be nice to get in ahead of that chair testing. You and I can start poking at things. One thing that I have noted already is that any Zulip traffic that is not sent to the Jabber topic is not bridged to Jabber at all. Now, the Medico client will show traffic on a channel for any topic, and it sends to the Jabber topic by default. I think it may not be possible to make it to send to anything else. But there will be the potential for interaction to be happening in Zulip that people that are connecting only through Jabber will not see. So,
Okay, thanks for flagging. Sure.
we have also identified that the links to the chat on the agenda page currently are pointing to XMPP, and doing so in a way that now break at least Safari. I checked, they're working for me in Firefox, but they need to be changed to be Zulip links, and we'll have a release of the data tracker before we get to the meeting that will make that change. Anything else on Zulip? I think Glenn is on the call. Thanks, Glenn. One of the things that Alex had identified was a setting deep in the configuration to affect how many listeners it had available for connections. And their load testing showed that the default was far too low. And Glenn has already modified the deployment that we have to a number that is, we expect, large enough for the load that we'll see during the actual sessions. It will be something to watch at the plenary in particular to see if we exceed. I think the new setting is for 500 simultaneous connections. So, moving on to Mailman and the global whitelist. We had quite a bit of activity since the last meeting to check the configuration and adjust the configuration of many mailing lists, the working group and research mailing lists in particular, to ensure they were configured to use the global whitelist and their accept these non-members setting. The non-working group lists are still being processed. Cindy has sent an update with the particulars of that to several of the people who are involved, but I didn't copy them into here. I think it's sufficient to know that it's a work in progress. We discovered, I don't remember if it was late last week or early this week. It was late last week that there was a flaw in the script that updates the global whitelist list membership, the thing that at global whitelist in the accept non-members actually reads. The program that calculated the new global whitelist calculated the list just fine. The step that merged that into the list membership for that global whitelist list, was commented out by who knows how long ago. That's been corrected. It seems to be operating correctly now. It'll be interesting to see if that opens the door to more spam on the lists, since there's a very, very large number of accounts that added to the global whitelist that look like throwaway Gmail accounts to me. We'll see.
And by the way, thank you, Robert, for this. And when you say a large amount, does it account for 5,000 or something like that? If you don't know, it's okay, right?
I think it's closer to 3,000 that came in. But yes,
Okay, so it's a good guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm confident then.
Any questions about the global whitelist? Does anyone feel that we need to prioritize changing the name of the global whitelist any higher than we have? We know it's something that for inclusive language purposes we should change. It's on our list, but right now it's pretty far down it with other things in front of it. If that priority needs to be adjusted, someone needs to speak to it, argue for it.
I mean, honestly, speaking for myself, it's only for 20 people that see this name, right?
Yeah.
20 or 30 people seeing this name, so.
No, 500-ish chairs could see it if they look at their list configuration. All right, moving forward, we're 20 minutes in. I think we're in a good pace for the agenda, but I feel like I'm talking too much. I'll try to pass that conversation token around a little bit more. We've had a significant upturn, I think, driven by changes of behavior at Gmail in complaints of failure of messages to deliver being returned noted as spam, both through mail aliases. That's been where the complaint has largely been so far, but quite recently also through mailing lists. John has taken a look at some of the complaints.
Yeah.
You want to talk
Honestly,
a bit?
yeah. I didn't know you were doing the reverse rewrite, because I would have told you not to do that, because it will cause exactly the failures we're seeing. I mean, I don't know how hard this is to implement, but if we could only do the reverse rewrite on mail going into the archives, not mail going out to people, that will probably decrease the failure rate somewhat, because it will break fewer DKIM signatures. And beyond that, the stuff from the problem with diagnosing Gmail failures is Gmail has a sophisticated machine learning system that adjusts the filters per user. So it's entirely common for something that, like, it work. User 1 says it fails, user 2 says it works fine for me, and they're both telling the truth. So I think the rewrite we are doing is about the best you can do. It's based on one that I've been using for years that seems to work pretty well for me. If we can actually collect a few more failure reports, like the Turles's failure reports, I actually figured out what the problem is there. It's because his mail is only authenticated with SPF, so when we relay it and we don't, it causes authentication failure. So it's like, these are I believe there's some fairly straightforward ways we can tweak this, but I can't ever promise it will be perfect.
Yeah. So one of the activities that I'm hoping we execute on when we do the Mailman 3 migration is putting our entire mail chain into something that's containerized so that we can actually build tests around it and have injection points and inspection points. So it will become easier to diagnose these kinds of things as they are reported. And that would also let us build regression tests over the chain and run those tests in a CI/CD environment. So, the biggest issue that we have with changing the way the reverse rewriter behaves is very similar to why we aren't doing forward rewriting for the aliases, is that our hook for it is at a place that's a junction to the handoff to Mailman, just to happen to be a convenient place where we could put post confirm in the path of the message and have it modify things. When we move to Mailman 3, almost all of the connections between postfix and post confirm, and between postfix, post confirm, and Mailman are going to change to be, if I have my terminology right, it's Melter, but there's a variant at the end, a particular Melter variant instead of the APIs that they're currently using. It will involve rewriting all of those touch points. And the advantage of that when we're done is that the number of places where we can hook increases dramatically. And we can put the things that make adjustments closer to the right place in the processing chain than they currently are. Anybody that's really experienced in doing Melter work with post confirm is, I would very much like help when we get to this from people that have been down the road and know where the dragons lie. Anybody have anything else to talk about the DMARC, DChem related stuff? I guess the punchline is that, yeah, problem's getting worse. We're still not planning on doing anything significant about it until sometime in the fall. Okay. Give me 1 second. For the tools workshop, I'll just note, even after our second press for feedback, we have 19 respondents. There's a link to the dashboard that shows what those respondents had to say. We've converted the IT infrastructure workshop into a design team that has already started. Hopefully we'll make progress with that design team at IETF 114. Of the remaining proposed workshops, the one about how RSCs and internet drafts are made available appears to be the one that is most important to the people who responded. This is the, we've used the euphemism doc.ietf.org to describe this, right? It's like, instead of having internet drafts and RSCs in so many places, do we try to concentrate them in one place and have all these other places refer to them and provide SEO. So big conversation to be had there. We'll put together a workshop to have that conversation. We are, I believe, about to issue the service plan for the wikis going forward, what would become the meeting wikis, what would be the IETF main wiki under wiki.js. There were some final edits being done to that Google document, and I'm hoping that this week it will go out for feedback and we can start executing to it. The integration with the data tracker credentials is complete, tested, appears to be functioning, and I think we're ready to start the transition. I would like to float just to see if it makes Alexa or Greg's skin crawl off, that we start pushing people to make the transition even as we're in the run-up to 114 for working group wikis, and then consider whether or not moving the meeting wiki over would be a reasonable thing to do. Get us away from the horrors that are track. So
Yeah. My skin hasn't crawled off, as far as I can tell yet. And there is a notion of doing something like a content sprint at 114 for folks who might be interested in be sort of on the vanguard of that move. So I'll float an email around about that.
awesome. For the data tracker, a lot of activity since the last meeting. You'll get the release notes for 8.4 through 8.6. A couple of things to point out. We have, as mentioned earlier, explicit capture of session attendance. And we have given people the ability to provide personal pronouns. I haven't checked to see how many people have taken advantage of that yet, but the plumbing is already in place with Medico. I believe I'll double check to use these pronouns and show them in the client if they've been set. We've got a lot of work that is essentially ready for us to deploy. We're in the last stages of merging and deploying. We're going to take the work that Nick has been executing on replacing the agenda page with a more modern front end, and deploy it in parallel with the old agenda page in a way where there's an easy button to switch back and forth between them, so that we can gather more feedback for the new agenda page as the meeting is going along. And I hope to have that merged and deployed before this week is over. We may wait and see if we can get the Zulip fix in at the same time. We also have the processing for the asynchronous processing for submissions through new API. So the first step towards making even the web interface submissions async. And by async, I mean somebody hits submit, they don't have to wait until all of the tests are done before the thing comes back and acknowledges that they've made a submission. It will be closer to what you're used to with other modern websites, where it comes back and says okay right away, and then gives you a progress meter about what steps it's going through and what things fail when. The deployment of this involves some components that we've not had for the data tracker before. RabbitMQ Celery. We're going to be running Celery in a Docker container, the Celery instance that is doing data tracker work. And I'm working through the deployment instructions with Jennifer right now. Again, this is something I hope that we have deployed either later this week or the first part of next.
And just to
Ultimately-
concern, Robert, again, sorry to disrupt you again. On the Monday of the IETF, right, we can expect 100 documents to be uploaded most probably. Is it the right
Sure.
time to do this test?
No, this isn't a test. This is the way we're going. This is a fix. So those 100 documents for the most part will be coming in through either the web API, which is not changing, or the old API, submission API, which is still present. So depending on when Martin switches his backend
GitHub
tooling to
yeah,
use
yeah.
the new API, we'll move to the new API. But he's already tested the new API out rather thoroughly and is excited to move to it.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
The big thing that we're going to have in progress over the next couple of weeks is the time zone aware timestamp work. You remember we've been struggling with this thing for many months. It's been cycle starved. We're able to give it cycles again recently. Jennifer's found a way that we believe we can get through the data migration on the order of minutes instead of on the order of hours, as was the plan back last spring when it was that we tried to do this. I don't know, 2 springs ago. But and we believe that it's quite likely that we've got this beast much better tamed. The bulk of the work that we have to do is changing the meeting application, where we have currently data that is stored without explicit time zones in the timestamps, where the times that are captured are in the time zone of the meeting. So the table has mixed data. The tables that are related to it have mixed data. Just what the timestamp means depends on where in time that timestamp happened to land, and you have to know about where the time zones of the meeting were. Now we're going to be building a large set of migrations and changes to the rendering code that converts everything to UTC. You know, the timestamps that aren't currently in meeting time local time zone are in server local time zone, being PST PDT. We're going to convert everything to UTC. This, once done, will let us tell Django to become time zone aware, which will let us move past Django 2.2, which fell out of support earlier this year. And it will allow us to make the database migration to Postgres, which requires time zone aware timestamps. So this is going to be the big chunk of our effort. The priorities that we have queued up after that, I have listed in that upcoming session. None of those should be particularly surprising. Eric, it would be good for you to reconfirm with the ISG, since enough time has gone by that people may have forgotten, that we had agreement to start requiring that submissions be fully expanded, and that we need to find a way to give people, you know, a way to preview to make sure that the expansion worked the way that they wanted it to work. But that's going to be fairly high on the list for just after 114. You can read the rest of these things. Those of you that happen to be on RSAB, be aware that balloting's not available yet, and that's something that we plan to address shortly after 114. Kasara, you've got several things that are up next. Could you take the mic for a while?
Sure. On other tools, there are a few releases, mainly dependency updates, and on the upcoming work, there's some work going on the IETF tool to make sure the HTML that it spits out is valid, and another change to change the IDD command line switches to make them easier to improve the documentation around that. Are there any questions around auto tools? I'll move on to Vector website then. There are no new releases since the last call. Springlord is working on a bunch of issues, and one of them involves upgrading the Vector version to the latest Vector versions. Right now, I think it's 3.2 or something like that. But I imagine any releases from Springlord work would be going to production after the meeting. Any questions about the Vector website? Seems not. So on XML to RFC, there's a single change, a single release. The main change was to drop the Python 3.6 support. There are a few other upcoming work on XML to RFC, mainly bug fixes around table generation. At the moment, I'm looking at whether we can make use of some third-party tool for table generation to reduce the complexities that XML to RFC has with text table generation. I'm also working on VCprint upgrade. There's list of there's bunch of PDF RFCs generated with the new VCprint version, VCprint upgrade, and people are reviewing it. I can add that list to the ticket if anyone wants to go and help us reviewing changes. This change involves in a PDF rendering engine change. So VCprint is moving from Cairo to its own different PDF rendering engine. So there'll be some the PDFs generated from both two versions will be different due to that change. Any questions on XML to RFC? Anything that needs to be raised? Okay, I guess we can move into mail archive, right?
Yeah. So just briefly, I just submitted some changes, basically a refresh of the container setup that we have in the repo for Mail Archive that you can use in your development environment that had gotten a bit stale. And then upcoming, actually the same for both projects, Archive and the Red System, is a move to Nginx as the front end, which will allow us to do the upgrade to Python 3.9 following that.
Nobody has questions about the mail archive or the registration system. Eric, could you talk about Yin Catalog?
unmuting would be, of course, better. So we get a meeting with all the, what I call the proponents. So it's Benoit Claes and a few others, including in this case, Carsten and Michael, by the way, but not yet Pantheon is the contractor, about the next step for Young Catalog. And the big one is really about the SID, and I see a couple of chat on this. We need to get moving. The first 6 months with Pantheon were basically addressing minor or medium edit features, but I think the major one will be basically this schema AD there. There are still 2 improvements in progress, but I would really like to point is that the server stability and performance is much better compared to 1 year or 2 years ago. Thanks to Greg and others, we now got Matomo statistics, and we have about 200 unique visitors per week, which is much higher than I was expecting, to be honest. Mainly using the search, or when they are searching for a leaf or a module or whatever, and the details. In addition is to also cover the API, because we don't know how many people are using the API rather than the web interface. And Greg, I'm not sure whether it's the right place to talk about it, but Pantheon, the contractors, has requested the IETF in an email yesterday, I guess, or the last week, whether they can use youngcatalog.org on their, basically, what we have done as a company. I don't remember who said they are not the contributors, really, because the idea is not coming out of them. They're more the executor, but they do it right. I'm quite happy with it. I'm not sure whether it's the right place to talk about this, whether we can allow this here.
Yeah, I will throw in that we should use, because we're more or less forced into an 800-pound gorilla style contributor the same way GitHub used contributor. So they provide a commit, we count them as a contributor.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
It's pretty clear in the contracts that we've got with anybody that's a contractor that stuff is work for hire, and the license that comes in where the copyrights lie is not ambiguous. So
Okie dokie.
Michael, just go ahead and jump in and talk. We're all around the table.
So about IDNet, so I tried to, it's not so easy to find from authors, so I guess you'll fix that a little bit. But so so we have the ability, as I understand it, to with IDNets, which we didn't have with RFC diff. Sorry, excuse me. I'm saying it wrongly. With ID diff, which we didn't have with RFC diff, to be able to upload a file as one of the 2 diff things, and then it creates a slug that diff that it keeps on the server, right?
Kasara, you want to? Did you hear Michael's question?
No. So it doesn't keep anything on the server, or like it's not persistent.
So I thought that was one of the design features, was that we would have a diff that I would be able to refer to that was created from, well, the last version of the public document and the version of the document I just generated on my own computer but haven't put anywhere, and that I could then share that URL. So I can do that right now with RFC diff, but then the result is private to me, which makes it hard for me to say these are the things that the new document has. And I thought that one of the design things in this revision was that we were going to wind up with URLs that were stable, even though that weren't what's the right word?
So it's not a design. It is not in the design parameters for the site to store state. So the things that it is doing diffs for would need to be somewhere that it could
be somewhere. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so then I ran into the list of URLs that it would accept, which did not include my site. So then I had to put the file on a branch in GitHub and hook at that. And anyway, I know how to do that, and that's okay for me. I think that may be a little bit difficult for others. So I think you consider um, uh, how that was going to work. I mean, maybe it's all going to work great for the full integrated, diff against editor's copy hosted on GitHub. Maybe that will just all work. But anyway,
We can
I
vet
think
other sites to include in the allow list, but having it be wide open turned out to be greatly
I
problematic.
understand. Yeah, that was a problem. Yeah. So I don't know what to suggest. I mean, there maybe there's 100 of us that actually have places we would care about, but that may be unwieldy. I don't know. I just thought that there was a design point, which was where it was going to be actually not generate all the diffs on the fly, but rather it was going to be able to store the diff that it produced for a certain amount of time, such it will be cacheable, etc. Blah blah blah. But you're saying wasn't a design goal in the end. Okay. Thanks, I guess.
A cacheable at an intermediate cache is something that doesn't require keeping local state. It just requires setting cache headers as the thing is served.
Well, but if it disappears out of the intermediate cache, and I give you the URL, then it's not gonna work, right? So I don't know that for the case that I upload a file that there's any value in setting a cache. It's cacheable. It's not cacheable. It's got to process it again, right? Whereas if I've set two URLs and I give you the diff, which is something I've done regularly for people, then especially with ISG discusses, this is the changes I'm proposing. Here they are. Then it's very valuable to share that URL, specifically what we've changed. And so I just have to make it sure that it comes from repeatable sources, and then it works, right?
Yep. All right, we are 7 minutes away from our scheduled time. I don't think there's anything that's left on the agenda. We have some questions in any other business. Eric, you added those. Do you want to go ahead and talk to them now? I think everything else can be taken as read. You still here, Eric? He may be gone. Yeah.
I got a request from one person whether we can run hackathon per working group and remote, obviously. I'm not sure. I know we provide tools for remote hackathon. I have no clue what those tools are. I got the request this morning, my time. But can we replicate them on a per working group interim? Maybe running 24 hours around the clock for one day?
Run per working group hackathon at an interim. Okay, so
I see your eyes, right?
the best thing for you to do, the best thing for you to do is to send that question to the NOC. So mail it to Sean.
Okay.
And he can start building an answer for it. Glenn, I
Eric,
think you're still on the call. Could you follow up on Eric's comment about notes.ietf.org being only IPv4? I'm pretty sure the expectation is that it would be both v4 and v6.
yeah. Before it was V6, right? So Mitico is whatever.
Hey,
Just want to be
Eric,
sure
when you send that question to the NOC about the working group hackathon, can you also copy Charles Eckel?
Okay.
Great, thanks.
Thanks. I'll do.
Was that
Michael,
a question about IPv6 for me? I'm sorry.
so Eric had an issue with not being able to get to notes.ietf.org over IPv6. John's reported in the chat that it's working over IPv6 for him. Perhaps you and Eric can iterate to find out why Eric's not able to get there.
Certainly, and I've checked the logs, and we do have a number of IPv6 connections on Notes right now. So, Eric, if
Okay,
you want to send
so-
me an email with some details, we can get you sorted.
No, it's a peering issue of my ASP, right? Clearly. So I'm all fine. Thank you.
Okay.
We've got 4 minutes left. I wanted to coattail a short discussion with Michael about submitting drafts in the future, unless somebody else has something more pressing. Not seeing anyone jumping to the microphone. I'm going to follow up further on the email that you sent, Michael. What you reported for everybody else's benefit was an issue where someone from Japan submitted a draft where the date was, from the server's perspective, tomorrow, because it was tomorrow in Japan, and the server complained. I looked at the code. The code has a 3-day allowance both ways. So something else was going on to cause that error to get thrown. Quite likely it's some long running thing is initializing its idea of what now is when it starts, and we just have to go find that. I thought we killed all of those, but yeah, we'll go find it. When we make the changes to the data shard to become time zone aware, one of the things that we're planning to do is at all places in the interface where we present deadlines, we're going to make it very clear what the deadline is down to the minute. We've been fuzzy in the past with what that meant. This is something the ISG is probably going to have to discuss and become comfortable with. We, like for the draft cutoffs, we may set it to, some maybe even not midnight UTC, but set it at some time. But there is that precise time where things will be cut off, and and it'll be well advertised, and easy for people to get both in UTC and in their local time zone. So I will follow up further with you, Michael, to see if we can chase down the point that was keeping the old date and find out if we can eradicate it. So if it was ID,
it just came to me as a working group secretary that I saw that this person had difficulty, and so it occurred to me that this looked like a bug rather than actually person being late, right?
We do still have a plan to replace IDNets with IDNets 3 shortly after 114. It's the last thing that Henrik plans to deliver to us. And from when I talked to him last, he was pretty far down the path and should be handing that off very soon. So. All right, unless anybody else has something else for the call today, and thank you all for your time. We can drop off, and hopefully we'll get to see several of you in person in Philadelphia. I hope I get to make it. It's more questionable now than it has been for various and sundry reasons, but we'll see how it goes. Thank you again. We'll talk to you all soon.
I think we still have a box of these mugs from 2012. I don't know if I can ship them, but someone wants one. This mug.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's someone else's basement. He may have thrown them out already. Anyway.
I volunteer to get one.
Well, I'll see if I can dig them up and how many I can stuff in my suitcase, but we'll see.
Wow.